All right, I've got the great one now. She is, of course, doing radio, TV, and now she's written a new book which comes out in January, Just Pursuit, a Black prosecutor's fight for fairness. You are the king of all media, the queen of all media.
Well, I kind of thought King gave it a little bit more mystique and intrigue just now. It really did. Let's see how I see your marketing skills there. It makes people scratch their head like you just did and wonder about it. I see you. But no, it's been a crazy, as you know, Pete, as I will say, anytime you and I are on together, that Pete Dominick is the first person to ever put me on the airwaves, period, hands down. And I'm not counting the first time I called into like a sports show when Tony Kukoc was taking over or coming to the Bulls. I was on radio then, but that was a long, long time ago during the Scottie Pippen years. But they now have made a documentary about our childhood and our younger years, they should say, and the Last Dance.
Did they include any of your calls in that documentary?
You know, I asked them not to. I wanted to downplay the role I had played in the success of the Chicago Bulls. Being from Minnesota, I figured, if there's ever a Timberwolf sort of history that I could be a part of that. So I asked, just for exclusivity purposes, let's just hold off for now. But we all know you're welcome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're doing it all, politics and legal commentary and sports commentary, apparently. I didn't know about that. And thank you for mentioning, of course, our beginning. You're obviously contractually obligated to me. You're still opening every broadcast. I think it's a little overboard that you give me plugs at your appearances with Wolf Blitzer on CNN. That seems to be, you're talking about some horrible thing. You're like, I am obligated to mention Pete Dominick, but I do appreciate it.
It's called the Rumpelstiltskin clause. It's a new thing. Instead of my first child, because I was like, can we not name the first kid that I have Rumpelstiltskin? And I didn't. And the idea of like the little pricking on a loom, whatever that's supposed to be, was old fashioned. So I was like, listen, I'll just mention you every time. No, but seriously, Pete, you were the first person. I think we talked about. I can probably remember we were talking about the legalization of marijuana in D.C. I mean. Shocking that would be our first conversation, but we were just talking about that.
Yeah, I was asking for you to predict the future. Can't wait. Yeah, I mean, now you've written this book and you've got this whole media career, and it's been fascinating to watch you. And, I am thinking about starting to have my own chant. They have the white supremacists, they have the Jews will not replace us. I am thinking of a Laura Coates won't replace me, but you've actually literally replaced me on my old channel in my old time slot. I mean,
what is wrong with you?
You started out.
What is wrong with you? Oh my God. What a lead in. I was like, where is Pete Dominick getting ready to go? Where is this conversation getting ready to go? Oh my goodness.
I'm so happy that you're there doing that. And I'm loving the POTUS show. I actually get to listen sometimes. Are you loving doing like the 3 hours on politics and I mean, just every day, every afternoon, and getting to interview all of those experts?
I love it. I mean, I used to do the 10 to noon hour on the Urban View channel. And I loved that as well. I love the Urban View family. I love the audience there. It was interesting because when you don't realize the time slot changes in terms of just the development of news throughout the day. There's the morning, what comes in the morning, that comes in all throughout the day, what happens maybe at night, hence the, on television, prime time versus morning, et cetera. So much happens throughout the course of a day that by the time you get to the 3 o'clock slot, you are really running the gamut. You're covering so many things, to the point where I just started calling the POTUS channel the People of the United States channel, because everything about what's going on, I try to cover. And, from a perspective of, look, I understand, like, I care about what's happening on Capitol Hill. I want to know about legislative initiatives. I want to know all the different things, but I really want to know about what matters to people. And I try to focus on the show on a very eclectic range of topics, things that I'm interested in, things I don't know a lot about, things I know a lot about, and have conversations about things. And I just really want people to feel like, as part of the show, this, you're so skilled in this. I mean, I look up to you in your work that you've done on radio and what you continue to do, because you really develop conversations and you ask the questions that people want to know more about. And the beauty of radio, unlike television, is you get to go behind the soundbite. and really go much deeper. And then the callers are fascinating. We run this whole spectrum. So sometimes, I mean, I suffer no fools. So people aren't calling to cuss me out. That's not really happening. People have tried, and then they go, oh, that's how this is going to go instead. So they really have a conversation. Even if we really disagree, we actually teach people how to have these civil conversations without, fisticuffs, as they say.
I was wondering how you would. I haven't heard you handle like a caller, an adversarial caller, or someone even making a respectful debate. But I mean, you were a prosecutor. I mean, you know how to argue, and you could eat someone alive. But your goal, I guess, I'm guessing, isn't that your goal is to try to, if the conversation can move, to move it.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation. Look, it's a conversation. It's not a competition, right? The idea of there are going to be things I don't agree with you at all, but I really want to get into your mind, not as like a manipulative aspect, but I want to understand what you're thinking. I mean, I remember, like every other person in the electorate, how often were you finding yourself going, after these exit polls and stuff, and he would go, nobody ever said what they were really doing. No one ever said what they were thinking. Polls were always telling us what they thought was happening. And I actually want to understand what people actually think. Like, why do you make the choices you do? Why do you believe the things you believe? And where social media has that place of anonymity, where people tend to want to, dive in, throw a bomb of sorts, and come back out for some toxic reason, radio is like, look, there's an anonymity in being able to actually dip my toe into the conversation, but actually tell you how I feel, have a full thought out conversation, and explain myself without having a toxicity. And I think that's what I need to hear people, to hear what they're doing. And there are times I can explain, but there's also more times for a conversation.
I mean, radio, what you're doing on the radio at SiriusXM really is a lot different from what you're doing on TV at CNN. I mean, most of the time at CNN, you are like on panel. You're the senior legal expert there. You're giving legal commentating, but you also now anchoring a lot as well. And I mean, but that's like, it's still not radio, because while it's live, it's still more scripted. It's way less time. And I'm wondering how much you get outside of you're still doing not only legal commentating when you're on CNN. You might be talking about, like the unfolding disaster in Kentucky after the tornado. Have you had to like step way outside your comfort level at all on CNN to cover something like that? Or,
you know what? It's not so much out of my comfort level, but it is out of the pigeonhole that people expect you to be in, right? And so for me, it's the idea of, when you talk about the law, what I'm most drawn to from the law, I mean, every lawyer is a generalist, right? We're expected to be generalists. You got to know a little bit about a lot of things and be competent, fluent, and have an expertise you can demonstrate, because that's your job. And so when I think about going to journalism, it really was a similar notion of becoming a generalist and talking about things through a different maybe lens and using a different side of your brain sometimes. But ultimately, it's about the idea of, let's talk about it. But I think people sometimes maybe don't expect me to know as much as, about certain topics. And I get it, because, right, I don't know everything. I don't even pretend to know everything. But I think what makes a good journalistic experience is that you're willing to ask the questions. And I'm not going to pretend I'm not going to pretend for the sake of, the conversation to not have an opinion, but people really want to have the insight and the information. But I think sometimes there are moments I'm like, most of the time I'm legitimately asking the questions, right? When I ask the questions, it's not, here's the answer I want you to give. It's, here's the question, and I'd like you to answer it. And so if I don't hear an answer, right, I want to probe deeper and understand what the actual answer is, not just sort of a cocktail party hour where we're all pretending to care about the weather a little bit more today than yesterday. Or are these called canops or canopies? How do you pronounce this word? I don't know, but it tastes delightful, right? Are these the Costco brand, or did you cater this? My real questions, how can I get this again in my home? I actually am asking the question I want to answer.
Right.
That's how it is. And by the way, why is your lighting so much better than mine? What's happening right now, Pete Dominic?
These are grow lights.
What does that mean?
Like for growing plants.
Oh.
So you just gotta you gotta get some pink grow lights in your studio. But you have an awesome you have this beautiful piece of art as your backdrop. And
I do. It's not, I love it, but I still, you're in my
also, I
life.
think
It's happening.
there's also a difference for the viewer. Like if people are watching this, the like our heads are very different. Like you're a pretty lady, and I look like a fucking gargoyle. I look like a ball. Like I look like
No, you don't.
here to fix something, but I can't fix it. So wait, let me ask you. I have a question. Where are you outside your comfort level? I'm reading your book. I watch your political analysis, your legal analysis. That shit is hard. Like it's hard to remember all that stuff. You went to Princeton. Are you one of those people who like is not only smart because all the traditional reasons are smart, but do you remember like everything that you learned and then you can then repeat it? Because where are you outside your comfort level? When are you in a conversation that you're like, I don't really want to be in this. I don't know what to say. Because you kind of a jack of all trades. You're a Renaissance person at this point.
Oh, well, that's so nice of you to think and believe and tell the masses. I appreciate that. I got to tell you, I think, well,
Do you have
I
a
would say
cultural blind spot?
I tend to remember the things that made me feel. And so that when it comes to things where my memory is tested, if I can reference it or tie it to a feeling, it's kind of like, in a way, I joke around with my kids. It's like the olfactory senses, right? The things that you smell has these memories. For me, it's that comes from feelings. And so a lot of the things I write about in my book, everything I write about my book, are things called Just Pursuit, by the way. Oh, this book, here it is. Yeah. Oh, twinsies.
You made the book. That's incest. That's incest. They're all your baby.
No, it's called like Mirror, Mirror on the Wall. What's the cutest book of all?
I love it.
Just Pursuit.
It's so good, Laura. The book is so good. Like you're in the middle of making a point about being able to remember stuff that you put in the book. I don't know how you were so able to be so detailed. Can you read from the book, or is that too early to do that? Or you have an exclusive that you're going to do that somewhere or something?
I can't read it right now. I'll come back on your show later though.
Okay, because there's a part where you really describe a guy so specifically, this guy who, everyone said knew everything, always was within 6 degrees of separation from the latest gossip, that guy, but no one ever told him he was that guy. Like,
that he wasn't that guy.
But he wasn't that guy. It's so funny. You're so funny in these really serious, different issues that you're visiting. But I'm so glad that you wrote this book, because this is the book I always wanted you to write, but I didn't think you could or would. Like could meaning maybe legally, or even that it would be a really bad idea for you to expose some of the things that you'd experienced, or would for any number of reasons.
Yeah.
Why did you write this book?
You know what? It was really kind of a humbling and vulnerable experience for me, because as I said earlier, I suffer no fools, but I don't leave myself out of criticism either. I mean, I oftentimes I pride myself in having the conversations about helping people to understand the justice system in America and about the power, whether it's through voting or otherwise, speaking truth to power, whatever your truth is. But people don't know the truth. And people have to know what the truth is. When you're marching for justice, when you're thinking about how to define justice, when you're thinking about what actually happens, you have to actually know what happens. And I chose to speak through it, not of the esoteric classroom discussion about this statute or this aspect of the Constitution. I do it through storytelling. It's a narrative memoir, and it's a storytelling, pretty episodic narrative memoir about the ways in which I had these internal battles of allegiance. What's it like for a Black woman who's civil rights oriented to, one, be a prosecutor, to two, help in a deportation, to be asked to help in a deportation, to have mistaken identity come right, knocking on the courtroom you are in charge of overseeing. To talk about victim blaming in a Me Too era, we talk about how we've got this common refrain of believe women, believe women. Does that happen in a courtroom, or does it not happen in a courtroom? Do we expect more from the people whose daily task, daily assignments is to be better, to understand justice more? What happens? Well, I mean, I go down to the South in part of the book and follow along my voting rights cases and what that's been like, or discussions about the gaps between, how prosecutors have their own level of privilege and how we react when others try to exhibit their privilege, and even the tensions between defense counsel and prosecutors and what that looks like. And so I really wanted people, it's the reason I was drawn to the law and drawn to civil rights and prosecution and trial work, was because I thought that people needed to have their stories told and to be able to be their champion and advocate by telling the facts and the truth, not sugarcoating it, not telling the story you want to hear, but here's what actually happens, and allow you the opportunity to do with it, to understand that call to action when you know the truth.
Yeah, there's no sugarcoating in this book. It's so good. I got the pre-order, the whatever version, whatever I got. The advanced copy is what I mean. And
here we go again. Hold on. Rumpelstiltskin. Because Pete was the first person to put me on radio of any kind, I made sure Rumpelstiltskin Claus. Hold on. He has a copy, everyone. I was delighted to give it to him. It was also paragraph 6, clause 4, subpart B of the Rumpelstiltskin clause.
This is the best contract I ever forced anybody to sign. So I had so much faith in you. It was such a good bet. So the book comes, I tear it open and I'm like doing nothing. It's Saturday afternoon and I sit down and I read it. And all 3 of my ladies all at some point walk through the room. They always see me sitting in the same spot reading, but I was reading for so long that each one of them was like, wait, what are you reading? You haven't moved. It's so good that I'm halfway through it before I put it down. And for some of the reasons you mentioned, I'll also mention, if you're a Laura Coates super fan, which I'm sure there are many, but I'm one of the OG, then you weave in a lot of your personal stuff, your marriage, your early child, you becoming a mom. And I love that stuff because part of the book is also about work-life balance and about the idea that you are doing what you're doing as a prosecutor for what, at this point, the which office you were in, but you're like pumping milk and like going to work all day and all that stuff I think is super important and enlightening for any reader. Why did you choose to do that? Did you have to get permission?
No, they were my breasts. So I was talking about my own milk pumping experience. No, I didn't have to ask anyone about that.
I heard they have a Rumpelstiltskin agreement.
I have to give Pete a hard time. I love Pete Dominic. Okay, we're really friends. So there you go. No, I didn't have to give permission, but what it was I had to give myself permission to be as open. Yeah. Because I admit I'm a guarded person who likes to preserve my personal life. And I really, there's something so sacred to me about, maybe it's me being possessive, but I am possessive about the things I hold dear and the life that I have and not wanting, and maybe it was partly that I was concerned about being judged. Part of it was concern about not being open. It was always this battle for me. But at the end of the day, I wrote it because I wrote it from a particular time period. I wrote it from the time when it was kind of these, the window into what it was like. I had back-to-back stair-step babies. And so I wrote it from the perspective of what it was like in that window of time when I was carrying my children, really, and what I was physically carrying and what I was carrying in terms of the weight of what I was seeing. And I wanted to write something that my children could better understand me, that I did a lot of self-exploration during the course of writing it. But I also really wanted people to understand that, I don't have the luxury, nor does really anyone else, the luxury of like abandoning who you are when you walk through this door of whatever your respective career is or whatever room you walk in. I mean, I know that like Elon Musk was the Time Person of the Year right now, but unlike these rockets that go to space and they shed something on the way up and they, all the baggage that goes around, that is, by the way, the extent to which I know anything about space exploration.
I think we found your blind spot.
It's my blind. I'm literally holding my ring finger and pinky together to give you the Spock signal because I can't even do that. Thank you very much. So there's that. But I will say, for me, I never had the luxury of being able to say, you know what, I'm going to abandon some parts of my identity. I'm going to approach the practice of law or prosecution simply from the perspective of the words on the page. when I prosecuted, when I was a civil rights attorney, when I was with the Department of Justice, when I was anything I did, I came in as a whole person. I came in with baggage. I came in with, priorities. I came in with maybe untapped bias, perhaps. Everyone does. I don't know what I come with. I know I was coming in from the perspective of being a Black woman, a wife, a mother, a human being. And it would have been disingenuous if I had told the stories of what happens from the perspective of, an android, a
But I
robot.
don't know. I guess when I first met you, you were obviously more guarded than publicly and certainly even privately. And I guess I really never thought that you would, share this much. Certainly, we've become good friends, and I know a lot about your life, met your family. But like, I was just so happy that you did for so many reasons, because I think it's important that you bring all of your own personal life and experience, especially to the job that you had working for the government as a prosecutor. At one point, you write in the book something about, you'd been underestimated most of your life. And I realized that I try to think hard about the people I know best. And I realized that I underestimated you at one point. I knew you were a brilliant legal mind and you were a great commentator. I know. But I always love to remind you of the time I was listening to you on the radio. I was driving down the highway. You were hosting a show. I think at that point it was your show. It might have still been my show, but you got your own show, of course, and Sirius. And anyway, I'm listening, and you told a story so funny about like tripping and falling in front of a homeless man and being judged by him. It was so funny.
Judge me. We had a moment.
It was so funny that I got angry. I was angry. I was like, how is she also like that funny? And I underestimated, I suppose, your humor for whatever reason, because of all of the rest of your credibility. Is it a good thing to be underestimated, or is it a bad thing?
I think it depends on your mental strength. I think, in the idea of how you deal with people's judgment of you and perception, right? If it means everything, how somebody else perceives you, I suppose it would hurt. But if you are, and I think it's a gift, the idea of, I focus very little on a day-to-day basis of people's, weighing in on who they think you are and the assumptions they make, because that's a very toxic place to be. But I think underestimated, I think it gives me creative room on some levels for people not to know what to expect. On the other hand, I think that sometimes when I'm underestimated, as everyone feels this way, it can close doors, and there are opportunities that are foreclosed before you even know it was even an option for you, because people think, oh, she or he can't do that. There was that Jay-Z line of, I'd rather be underestimated than underpaid. I mean, you can judge it from that way, and what I think I got that wrong. Let me Google it. I don't lose my black card. Hold on a second.
Well,
I'll just say this. I paraphrased Jay-Z just now, but the point is, I think people are underestimated in all things that they do. And I think that the key for me is, and how I think one of my survival tactics is, and what I pride myself on, and that I've learned over the course of my 41 years now, is as long as I don't underestimate myself, I'm okay.
Well, I like that. Thank
you for that pregnant pause you just gave, and that contemplative look off to the right that you gave. I thought that was nice.
I was just looking up that Jay-Z quick. I went from the favorite to the most hated, but would you rather be underpaid
or overrated? That's what it is. Would you rather be underpaid or overrated? There you go. Oh, damn it!
No, but I like that. I like everything that you just said. I think that's really very specific and personal worldview that I share. I appreciate that a lot. So you talk so much about the justice system from the vantage point of the role that you played and experienced as a prosecutor and in the courtroom, and you explain a lot of the other roles, but you also talk a good bit about race. You talk about the the Hispanic immigrant. You talk about this young Black man who's in your courtroom, a Black woman who is a victim of a crime, just every single chapter is so good. And you actually describe them really well on your Instagram page. This is a real professional outfit you're working with this book. And
thank you.
I'm wondering, like, it just kind of seems like the entire criminal justice system is rigged against people of color and almost every part of it. And it's so hard to get out once you're in. And I wonder, from the vantage point of all the different roles you played, when you talk about how that got to you, and it's just so pervasive. And I think people don't talk about it nearly as much as they do with policing than they do in courts.
I think that's because, as I said, people don't necessarily, I mean, people will speak about what they know and what they are learning from, which is why it was so important to really have a personalized approach in storytelling for this, because I wanted people to, in some respects, see themselves in each chapter, see themselves. Obviously, it's through the lens of myself, but see yourself and what would you have done? Because I really think there is value in people being able to put themselves in the shoes of another person, to be able to figure out, in a world of, I wish somebody would, or here's what I would have done, to really think about what that would look like through the constraints of the justice system. However, what I made sure to also include is there are real moments of triumph and real moments of human connection in our justice system. There are real moments where, kindness emerges in the most unexpected places and humanity is, exemplified. And those were real moments that are also a part of the justice system. And it comes from some very unlikely places. Sometimes it's through the lens of the family of a victim who are intent on showing mercy. Sometimes it's just the kindness between colleagues. Sometimes it's the shared glances that are exchanged that move a needle forward. And those things all happen. And I think that's also important because none of this is binary. It's not either rigged or fair. It's a scale. And justice sometimes is not as easily defined. And I think this book, and what I was hoping to do through all forms of commentary, is to help people really understand that there is no one definition. And for that reason, there can be a variety of approaches to solving some of the problems that we have. That if we only think about it, if justice reform only equals the end of qualified immunity, or it only equals a grand jury process changing, or bail reform, if it only equals that,
right,
it gives politicians an escape hatch. Because if they can't solve that, well, there you go. We'll just throw up our hands instead. And then, okay, well, there's nothing we can do. Oh, well, that issue is now, that was it. That's how we define it. That's how we do it. Well, I don't want exit ramps. I want us to stay on the course. And there are many ways to approach justice, to define justice, and to achieve justice. And, I'm a lawyer, and just like doctors, we practice our profession. We practice medicine, we practice law, and we pursue justice. And I want at some point it to be the dog that catches the car, and what our world will look like when it does.
Well, let me ask you then about a couple of the just larger issues that you've been covering on your show and at CNN that aren't so specific to the book. But I want to have you back when it's out, or as much as you want. I'll talk about each chapter until everybody in the world buys this book, because I also think that my world, or my thoughts, changed on criminal justice in America and around, I don't know, I want to say like whenever Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, came out. Because when I read that book, I realized that there were, even victims of crime, people of color, legal experts that didn't know a lot of shit that was happening in our criminal justice system. Mm-hmm. Your book basically takes some of the injustice that she talks about and actually puts actual real life stories to it in each chapter, and kind of documents so much of the injustice that you witnessed. And I don't know where you learned to write so well, but it's really well written. Did you have help? Are you this good of a writer?
No, well, are you going to hate me if I tell you I wrote it?
Who helped you? Did John Grisham?
No. Oh, John Grisham. No, because he didn't want to introduce me to Tom Cruise. So I said, the hell with it.
And I
No,
met
I
him.
wrote it. It's my work. I wrote it, and that was something that was very important to me, to make sure that it was my words, my experiences, and that, for good or for bad, this is who I am. I don't think you can ever delegate that. You can't delegate yourself away.
I love that. I was just teasing you. I didn't think you had any help.
But if you know John Grisham, I mean, if he wants to write number two.
I met John Grisham at the Colbert Report, and I
Oh,
talked.
oh, what a name drop! Oh, I met John Grisham at the Colbert Report when I was having tea with the Queen.
That's my Rumpelstiltskin. uh, and I told him, I got so nervous, I kept telling him books that he had written that I liked.
You did not, did you really? Oh God, was he like, wow, tell me more about
He
that
was so in. He's like super tall, and I was like looking up
Is
at
he
him.
really?
I really like The Firm, and he was like, "Thank you," and I was like, "Yeah, I liked it when this one part." Do you ever have that now that you're like basically famous? Do people come up to you and be like, I just love you," and then you're like, "Thank you," and then they don't really know what to say because they're so excited just to see you.
No, because I'm not very tall. People usually pass me by and have no idea who I am.
Little girl.
They're like, little girl, go back to school. And
She
I'm
looks like
it's
Laura
distance
Coates on CNN.
learning. It's
She looks
distance
like
learning.
she looks exactly like Laura Coates on CNN, but Laura Coates on CNN is 6'2", and that little girl is like 2 apples.
Well,
So
first of all, you've been on, you do commentary. They make us all the same height.
yeah,
So
you look
like
on TV, yeah.
David Gergen is about 9 feet tall, but next to me, he's the same height as me. And I'm like, how does that make you feel? And he just kind of nods.
When you and Gergen are on the same panel, they actually make him sit on the floor, which I think is really interesting. So what I was going to ask you though is where a lot of your expertise, and I think some of the book certainly crosses over into reality right now. I feel like the most important thing that we can do right now in this country is pass voting rights and bring back what the gains that had been made with the Voting Rights Act. And how much are you talking about that? And how much does that affect everything in your book? All of criminal justice depends on who's in what office making what laws.
I really loved my time in the voting section of the Civil Rights Division. It was really an unbelievable honor, because when I think about wanting to be a lawyer, when I think about wanting to focus on any aspect of my career, I really take seriously those that came before me. I really take seriously the idea of all of the people, sung and unsung heroes, who played a role in even the opportunity for this little girl to do what I do, for this person to be in a position, for anyone. You're talking about my mom grew up in the segregated Jim Crow South. My father, grew up in, outside in Worcester, Massachusetts, and it's still 1952, 1950s, right? There's still young Black children in that version of America. And there are so many moments that I see, similar experiences that I should not have, conversations that continue to happen. And a lot of that, even lessons that my parents would teach me, their parents would teach them, that I still now have to teach my kids. The fact that I'm still having conversations about voting rights, being on a chopping block, or rolling back these elements of democracy is offensive to me. And it's shocking to me. And so it tells me there's still a lot of work to be done. And Congress has within its power the ability to recalibrate the formula of Section 5 that the Supreme Court said was no longer necessary. It's shameful they have chosen not to do so. I recognize the political hurdles in place that prevent it from being expediently accomplished, but it doesn't matter it doesn't matter. There are hurdles. It still should be accomplished. And so every conversation we have, whether it's discussions about the big lie, conversations about criminal justice reform, conversations about immigration policy, conversations about healthcare, conversations about inflation, about our school system, about, infrastructure. I don't care what conversation you're having. You exclude people from each aspect when you take away their right to elect someone of their choosing.
Exactly.
And because this has not been a centralized focus, it is shameful in a democracy. And so, and it's more than just talking about voting rights at the sexiest of elections. People want to talk about it for the presidential election. Let's talk about it for the water board, the water utility, the school board. Talk about the local elections that are impactful as well. And until we start having a real conversation, Pete, and you know this, about the things that give you entree into your rights, we will have none.
Whew, well said. I'm going to let you go because it's time for dinner. The book is
What are you having for dinner?
I'm having I got to be honest, it's because I'm talking to you, but I wasn't expecting to be asked. I'm having chili and potato skins.
Are they on the potato skins? Like
my daughter works at this restaurant, and she brought home from the restaurant like potato skins.
Are you gonna have cheese and sour cream on it, or is there a sour cream shortage? I almost said, is there a sour cream shortage? I don't know why that where my diction went when we talked about sour cream. I'm gonna have some salmon, some white rice, and maybe I'll make something. I'm probably gonna have a pint of ice cream afterwards, but I mean, I'm initially gonna lead into that dessert in a good way. My husband made it today, so I don't really know. I think we're gonna have that. He makes delightful salmon.
I really thought you meant that he made the ice cream. I was like, what the he made ice cream?
Is that what you think happens in my house? That people are making ice cream? That's a Monday night thing we're doing?
I know he's an impressive dude.
He is impressive. But when he starts making ice cream, I may not ever leave my house.
Thank you, Laura Coates.
Thank you, Pete Dominic. Love you.
Love you.